How would the planetary boundaries be translated into effective policies? Again, another difficult question. Now, this concept of planetary boundaries is relatively new. It is still being analyzed, and we still need to actually do more research to confirm. Now, what is clear is that we have reached a point where I think we have reached a sort of tipping point in many of the areas that have been identified in the planetary boundaries concept. How to resolve that? Of course, we cannot continue to close our eyes and just to pretend that there is no climate change. We cannot continue to close our eyes and pretend that there is no pressure on our freshwater resources. We cannot say that there is no land degradation going on in the world. But at the same time, we know that there are billions of people that are still suffering of hunger. And at the same time, we know that there are communities out there that have no access to fresh water. We know that waterborne diseases kill more people than any form of violence at the moment, including wars. So that's the challenge. How can you develop policies when you have such disparities between nations? When you have actually the beef that you consume here coming from Brazil or from Paraguay is having huge impact on the Amazon forest or in the Chaco area in Paraguay. That's the big question. Now, how can you develop policies that make sense? The idea of actually developing a governance system that will be using a sort of blame matrix, I think, is one of the options that are out there. Basically, implementing some of the decisions of the UNFCCC. The Kyoto Protocol is actually based on that. How many countries are emitting greenhouse gases, and what will be what policies can we develop so as to reduce that emission? It comes down to actually identifying how many gigatons should be preserved or should be avoided as emissions coming from many of these countries. So the idea is maybe to see the ecological footprint that is developed by each country, and to see which countries are having the higher footprint on the world, and that maybe option would strike a sort of balance between the developed countries and the developing countries, because it is a no-go to suggest that all countries will have to have an equal share on the burden. That will not fly in the international negotiations. So it is important maybe to have that concept of ecological footprint and see how would you develop a blame matrix based on the level of ecological footprint, and then ask countries to reduce their consumption patterns, to reduce the pressure on the planet. These policies might take some time before they are negotiated and completed, but we have to do that. We know that we live in a moment where our children, I'm not talking about our grandchildren, but our children will be affected. We ourselves are being affected by the number of disasters we are seeing. We know the links that are out there between degradation of the environment and conflicts. We know that over the last 60 years, up to 60% of internal conflicts are generated by natural resources, either scarcity of natural resources or by abundance of natural resources. Whether it is fighting to have access to land, farmland or grazing land, or whether it is fighting to have access to the minerals, the diamond, the oil that is out there, or the forest products and so forth. Unfortunately, only 25% of peace agreements have natural resources provisions. What it means is that there is a risk of relapse of these conflicts over a period of 5 years. So we cannot continue to do that. We know that we have more disasters. This has been repeated times and times again, this conflict. So we have to come up with these policies, and I think this matrix blame type of governance is one option. And I think organizations, the multilateral platform is there for negotiations, and an organization like the United Nations Environment Program can play a role, not necessarily the only one, but I think it is one of the governance systems that has been put in place and has been in existence for 40 years, needs to be improved, but is still probably one of the best platforms that is out there in the world at the moment to negotiate these kind of issues.